The pounding on the door jolted Mark awake, his heart hammering against his ribs. Who could be knocking at this hour? As he stumbled through the darkened hallway of his modest home, he glanced at the clock, 12:17 a.m. With his 5-year-old daughter sleeping just rooms away, he hesitated before the door, fear and curiosity battling within him. When he finally turned the knob and pulled it open, the sight before him made his blood run cold. There, illuminated by the porch light, stood his ex-wife, the woman who had abandoned their family 3 years ago without a trace. If you're feeling that chill down your spine already, you're going to want to stay with us until the very end of this incredible true story. Hit that like button if you've ever had an unexpected visitor change your life, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of redemption, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Mark Stevens had built a life from broken pieces. At 34, he hadn't planned on raising his daughter Lily alone, but life rarely follows our carefully laid plans. 3 years earlier, his wife Sarah had disappeared from their lives without warning, leaving only a hastily written note, "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." No explanation, no forwarding address, just the crushing weight of abandonment and the bewildered eyes of a 2-year-old who couldn't understand why her mommy wasn't coming home. The first year had been the hardest. Mark would wake up reaching for Sarah in the darkness, only to find cold sheets beside him. He'd catch himself calling her name when he needed help with Lily, the silence that followed more painful than any argument they'd ever had. But slowly, methodically, he had rebuilt their world. He'd learned to braid Lily's hair, though his first attempts had been laughably lopsided. He'd mastered the art of chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, eventually expanding his culinary skills to include vegetables that Lily would actually eat. He'd rearranged his work schedule as a graphic designer to be home when Lily returned from preschool, and later kindergarten. Their little family of 2 had found its rhythm. Mark's parents helped when they could, driving down from Millbrook every other weekend. His neighbor, Mrs. Patel, an elderly widow with grandchildren scattered across the country, often watched Lily when Mark needed to meet with clients. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving in their own quiet way. Until that knock at midnight changed everything. "Sarah," Mark whispered, her name foreign on his tongue after so long. She looked both familiar and like a stranger. Her once shoulder-length brown hair was now cut short, and she'd lost weight, too much weight. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she clutched a worn backpack to her chest like a shield. "I know I have no right to be here," she said, her voice hoarse. "But I didn't know where else to go." Mark's mind raced with 1,000 questions, but his body remained frozen in the doorway. Part of him wanted to slam the door in her face, to protect the life he'd carefully constructed from the hurricane that had once torn it apart. Another part, a part he thought he'd buried long ago, ached at the sight of her obvious suffering. "Dad?" A small voice called from behind him. "Who's at the door?" Mark turned to see Lily standing in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her favorite stuffed elephant dragging on the floor beside her. When she looked past him to the doorway, her expression shifted from curiosity to confusion. Is that my mommy?" she asked, her voice small but clear in the midnight quiet. The question hung in the air between them all, heavy with 3 years of absence, of bedtime stories without a mother's voice, of kindergarten art projects labeled "for Dad" instead of "for Mom and Dad," of birthday candles blown out with one parent missing from the celebration. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the daughter she'd left behind, now taller, her baby features giving way to the girl she was becoming. "Yes, Lily," she whispered. "It's me." What followed was the most difficult conversation of Mark's life, conducted in hushed tones at the kitchen table while Lily reluctantly returned to bed, extracting a promise from Mark that Sarah would still be there in the morning. Mark made no such promise, unsure himself what the dawn would bring. Sarah's story unfolded in fragments, each more painful than the last. She had left not out of lack of love, she claimed, but because of the depression that had consumed her after Lily's birth, a darkness that had never lifted, that had convinced her that her family would be better off without her. She had drifted from city to city, working minimum-wage jobs, living in cheap apartments, and eventually spiraling into addiction as she tried to numb the pain of her choices. "I've been clean for 8 months now," she said, staring into the mug of tea Mark had reluctantly prepared. "I've been in a recovery program in Philadelphia. My counselor suggested I make amends, but I wasn't ready to face you both yet." She paused, her hands trembling slightly. "Then last week, I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma." The word hung in the air between them. Cancer. The enemy that had taken Mark's own mother when he was in college, that had left his father a shadow of himself for years afterward. "The doctors say my chances are good with treatment, but—" Sarah's voice broke. "I realized I couldn't face this without at least trying to make things right. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Mark. I know I don't deserve to be in Lily's life. But I needed to see her one more time, to tell her that leaving was never about her." Mark sat in silence, his emotions a tangled mess he couldn't begin to unravel. Anger at Sarah's abandonment warred with compassion for her illness. Fear of disrupting Lily's stable life competed with the knowledge that his daughter still asked about her mother, still kept a faded photograph of Sarah by her bed. "Where are you staying?" he finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Nowhere yet," Sarah admitted. "I came straight from the bus station. I have enough money for a motel for a few days, but after that—" She left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. Mark ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah would have recognized from their years together, his tell when he was making a difficult decision. "You can sleep on the couch tonight," he said finally. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." That night, Mark barely slept, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in his home. He checked on Lily twice, watching her peaceful sleep and wondering how he could protect her heart while still doing the right thing, whatever that was. Morning brought no clarity, only the surreal sight of Sarah sitting awkwardly at their breakfast table while Lily peppered her with questions. Where had she been? Did she know Lily had lost 2 teeth? Had she seen Lily's school picture? Each innocent query was a knife to Mark's heart, a reminder of all the moments Sarah had missed, all the times he'd had to be both parents to the bright-eyed child now eagerly showing her mother her favorite books. The days that followed established an uneasy routine. Sarah found a small apartment nearby that she could afford for a few months with her savings. Mark agreed to supervised visits with Lily, watching with a mixture of pain and wonder as his daughter cautiously rebuilt a relationship with the mother she barely remembered. He contacted his lawyer, unsure of his legal obligations but determined to protect Lily's emotional well-being above all else. Sarah began treatment at the local hospital, the harsh realities of chemotherapy quickly taking their toll. Mark found himself in the impossible position of explaining to Lily why her newly returned mother was now losing her hair, why she was too tired for their planned trip to the park, why she sometimes had to rush to the bathroom in the middle of their visits. "Is Mommy going to die?" Lily asked one night as Mark tucked her into bed, her directness catching him off guard. "The doctors are doing everything they can to make her better," Mark answered carefully, wishing he could offer more certainty. "Like when I had strep throat and had to take the yucky medicine?" "Something like that, but the medicine is stronger because her sickness is bigger." Lily considered this, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "If she gets better, will she leave again?" The question struck Mark like a physical blow. It was the fear he hadn't allowed himself to voice, the doubt that lingered beneath his cautious acceptance of Sarah's return. "I don't know, sweetheart," he answered honestly. "But no matter what happens with your mom, I will always be here. That's a promise." As weeks turned to months, the boundaries between their separate lives began to blur. Mark found himself driving Sarah to chemotherapy appointments when she was too weak to drive herself. Lily insisted on making get-well cards that covered Sarah's refrigerator with colorful declarations of love and encouragement. Mrs. Patel, initially skeptical of Sarah's return, began sending over homemade soup for the poor sick girl. The first time Sarah's treatment was delayed due to her weakened immune system, Mark found himself sitting beside her hospital bed while Lily was at school, listening as she spoke of her regrets, her hopes, her fears. The anger he had nursed for 3 years didn't disappear, but it began to transform into something more complex, a recognition of Sarah's humanity, her flaws, her struggle with mental illness that had gone untreated for too long. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Sarah said one afternoon as they waited for her oncologist. "But I want you to know that watching you with Lily, seeing the father you've become, it's made me realize what strength really looks like. You stayed when I ran. You built something beautiful from the mess I left behind." Mark didn't respond immediately, his eyes fixed on the waiting room television to hide the unexpected emotion her words had triggered. "I didn't have a choice," he finally said. "She needed me." "You always had a choice," Sarah countered gently. "That's what makes what you did so remarkable." 6 months after Sarah's midnight return, her doctors delivered the news they had been hoping for: her cancer was in remission. The celebration was cautious. They all understood that remission wasn't a cure, that vigilance would be required for years to come, but it felt like the first unambiguously good news in a journey marked by complexity and pain. It was Lily who suggested that Sarah join them for Christmas, her child's logic cutting through the awkwardness that still sometimes fell between the adults. "Mom should be with us because she's family," she declared with the certainty only a 6-year-old could muster. "And Christmas is for families." Mark agreed, though not without trepidation. Their relationship had evolved into something he couldn't quite define, not the marriage they once had, but not simply co-parents either. They were two people connected by a child they both loved, by a history both painful and precious, by a future neither of them could clearly envision. Christmas morning found them in Mark's living room, Lily's excitement filling the house as she tore through her presents. Sarah had brought gifts too, thoughtfully chosen books and art supplies that showed she had been paying attention to her daughter's developing interests. The moment felt both ordinary and extraordinary, a family holiday that was both familiar and entirely new. After Lily had gone to bed that night, exhausted from the day's excitement, Mark and Sarah sat in the quiet living room, the Christmas tree lights casting soft shadows on the walls. "Thank you," Sarah said simply, "for letting me be part of today." Mark nodded, turning his coffee mug in his hands. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about what happens next." Sarah tensed visibly, preparing herself for whatever boundaries he might set. "Lily needs stability," he continued. "She needs to know that the people she loves aren't going to disappear from her life without warning." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I won't do that to her again, Mark. I swear it." "I believe you," Mark said, surprising himself with the truth of the statement. "But I need more than promises. I need to know that you're taking care of yourself, your mental health, not just your physical health. I need to know that you're building a support system beyond just me and Lily." Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I've been seeing a therapist weekly. I have a support group at the cancer center. I'm trying, Mark. Every day, I'm trying to be someone who deserves to be in her life. In your lives." The conversation continued late into the night, not an ending but a beginning, the start of a new understanding between two people who had once promised to love each other forever, who had failed in that promise, but who now found themselves creating something different, a commitment to their daughter's well-being that transcended their past mistakes. As the new year began, their unconventional family continued to evolve. Sarah found a job at a local bookstore that accommodated her ongoing medical appointments. Mark adjusted his work schedule to allow Sarah more time with Lily while ensuring he remained the constant presence his daughter needed. They established clear communication, boundaries, and expectations, the framework of co-parenting they should have built years before. There were setbacks along the way. Sarah's first post-treatment scan showed a concerning shadow that turned out to be benign but triggered all their fears anew. Lily went through a period of testing limits with both parents, angry outbursts revealing the confusion and insecurity she still felt about her mother's absence and return. Mark dated briefly, a relationship that ended partly because of the complicated dynamics with his ex-wife. But there were triumphs too. Lily's school performance improved as the emotional turbulence in her life settled into a more predictable pattern. Sarah celebrated 1 year in remission with a small party that included Mark's father, now cautiously supportive of her place in their lives. Mark's design business expanded, allowing him to hire an assistant and reduce his working hours. On a warm evening in late spring, nearly 2 years after that midnight knock, Mark sat on his back porch watching Lily and Sarah plant flowers in the garden beds that had been neglected for too long. Their heads were bent together, dark hair against dark hair, their laughter carrying across the yard as they discovered a family of earthworms in the rich soil. Mrs. Patel joined him, settling into the chair beside his with a contented sigh. "You've done a good thing, Mark," she said, nodding toward the garden. Not many men would have opened their door that night, much less their heart. Mark shook his head slightly. "I didn't do it for Sarah," he said. "I did it for Lily." Perhaps at first, the older woman agreed. But healing comes in unexpected ways, doesn't it? Sometimes the very person who broke your heart is the one who helps you find a stronger way to put it back together. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across his backyard, Mark considered Mrs. Patel's words. His life wasn't perfect, far from it. The future still held uncertainties: Sarah's health, Lily's growing understanding of her family's complicated history, his own journey toward forgiveness and trust. But watching his daughter's joyful face as she showed her mother a particularly impressive worm, Mark felt something he hadn't expected to feel again: peace. The midnight knock that had once frozen him with fear had ultimately opened a door to something he couldn't have imagined, not the restoration of what was lost, but the creation of something new, something resilient, something true. A family defined not by conventional boundaries but by the choice to love despite pain, to forgive despite hurt, to build despite destruction. As Lily ran toward him, hands muddy and smile wide, Mark opened his arms to embrace her, grateful for the journey that had brought them here, to this moment, to this life, to this unexpected second chance. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the courage to open a door, even when you're afraid of what waits on the other side. Sometimes the greatest acts of love aren't grand gestures but small, daily decisions to choose compassion over anger, hope over fear, connection over isolation. And sometimes, the family you fight to build becomes stronger than the one you originally imagined. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, redemption, and the extraordinary resilience of ordinary people. Remember that second chances don't always look the way we expect them to. Sometimes they're messier, harder, and more beautiful than we could have imagined.